Hello again. Nobody likes mercenaries. They never have done, and mercenaries are usually treated as being outside the usual rules of warfare. The British mercenaries who fought in the Belgian Congo in the 1960s were regarded with a good deal of suspicion, and it was mingled with contempt. Uh, they were regarded as being beyond the pale, frankly. In 1976, a former British soldier went to Angola with a few others to fight in the civil war there as a mercenary and was captured. Together with a few other men, he was tried and then put up against a wall and shot. It was accepted in Britain at that time that this is what you might term an occupational hazard for mercenaries. Most people greeted the news that a mercenary, even a British one, was to be executed with shrugs. After all, what do you expect if you go and get mixed up in somebody else's war like that? For some reason which I cannot quite understand, attitudes, at least in this country, seem to have changed towards mercenaries since then. These days, they look to me to be hailed as idealistic young heroes who have taken a stand against a powerful aggressor and wish to protect a smaller nation from being overwhelmed. This is, of course, all nonsense. The same excuses were advanced in the 60s and 70s, although they didn't cut any ice in those days. The mercenaries who were recruited to go off to Angola in 1976 from this country claimed that they were fervently anti-communist and were fighting to prevent the Russians from getting a foothold in southern Africa. This was every bit as ludicrous as the reasons given for the current crop of mercenaries. Young men who've got a taste for adventure, and particularly those who have been in one army, find that life can seem a little stale and dull on Civvy Street, and the prospect of some genuine fighting can be an exciting one. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about, for I was myself on the fringes of the Lebanese Civil War in the 1970s, and I was in the company of such people. Young men are idiots, and they often like wars. Idealism simply doesn't enter into the case. The current crop of British politicians, though, seem to have forgotten all this, even if they once knew it. I doubt if the current Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, knows anything at all about the history of mercenaries. She was, after all, a babe in arms at the time of the Angolan business. That might be why she was shooting her mouth off a few months ago, encouraging young men from England to go to Ukraine in the struggle for democracy, as she called it. Stupid woman. In previous incidents of this kind, when British mercenaries were flying off to take part in other people's wars, the foreign secretaries at the time issued stern warnings against such actions rather than wishing them luck. There was usually also a reminder that such things are technically illegal under the Foreign Enlistment Act, although there hadn't been a prosecution on that since 1898 or something. But anyway, it's generally been made clear to these mercenaries that nobody approves of what they're up to. People simply don't seem to understand these days about that kind of thing. Even an MP's son is fighting as a mercenary. Ben Grant, son of MP Helen Grant, may be seen in the thumbnail to this video. As I say, I quite understand what causes foolish young men to go gadding off and getting themselves involved in other people's wars, but it really isn't apt to end well. It never has in the past, and it isn't going to this time either. Here is one curious point, but I don't know if it's of any significance. The most recent examples of British mercenaries being caught and put on trial often seem to involve young men whose ancestry is not what most of us would regard as being completely British. The British mercenary who was executed in Angola in 1976 was called Costas Georgiou, and his background was Greek Cypriot. One of the British mercenaries in the newspapers this morning is called Aidan Arslin. He may well be from Nottingham, as the newspapers report, but I strongly suspect that his parents weren't British. Ben Grant, whose picture may be seen in the thumbnail, is also not of entirely British background, perhaps. Is there something about such mixed ancestry which makes it more likely that people will end up fighting for a foreign army? I don't know, but it's a curious coincidence. Here is some advice for young men tempted to do anything like this. Do not go and fight as a mercenary. The game really isn't worth the candle, even if the Foreign Secretary offers to hold your coat for you while you get stuck into the Ivans. Adventures of this sort all too often end badly.